name is Glen Obear. I'm the R&D Director at Exacto, and I'm here today with Dr. Matteo Serena, a professional researcher with University of California-Riverside, and Dr. Doug Soldat, Turfgrass Extension Specialist from University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you guys for joining today.
Glad to be here, Glenn. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn, for having us.
Cool. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to go to Matteo first. Can you talk a little bit about your research program? What are you and your group working on in Riverside, California?
Okay, in California, here we are practically the only turfgrass research group in the entire state. So we cover a lot of ground, both in terms of research and space. We have a research farm here, which is constantly expanding. We're approaching 10 acres. And the vast majority of that is taken for a breeding program. So Dr. Marta Pujanowska is in charge of the breeding program, and she's working to develop Bermuda grass and Kikuyu grass. They will be more drought tolerant and cold tolerant. So we are in the process of releasing 2 new Bermuda grasses for Southern California climate. We also are covering the portion of the pest management, in which is product testing and evaluation for anywhere from nematodes control, weed, fungicide and insecticide. As you know, every product then has to be released in California, needs to have California data. So this one keeps pretty in business. And then with that, I'm in charge of the water conservation and salinity management program, and I conduct research that have to do with saving water in turfgrass, either utilizing different water sources, different irrigation system, or product which help alleviate drought conditions in turf. We're pretty lucky here because the weather, it's a Mediterranean climate. So we go through summertime in which, for example, last year we had a total of a quarter inch of rain for the entire season. So everything that we grow have to be supplemented with irrigation. Therefore, it's very easy to control how much water we can give to the turf.
Thank you. Got it. Doug, how about you? Can you talk about your research program and what you and your group are working on?
Yeah, sure. So this is I was just talking with Ria before we recorded. This is my 15th year at UW-Madison. So, I think we have a small research program here right now. It's just myself and Paul Koch in plant pathology. So I kind of have responsibilities for everything that isn't disease right now. And I think, I was trying to figure out what unifies my program. Normally I say like fertility and water efficiency, which is true, but I think looking back at the unifying thing is like, how do you make better decisions using data? Like how can you use the weather data to help you schedule growth regulators? How can you interpret soil and water test reports more accurately and make decisions based on that? My most recent PhD student, Zhou, just finished a project looking at ways that we can predict creeping bentgrass growth that will hopefully allow us to apply fertilizer more efficiently. And I have a current PhD student, Michael Becken, who's looking at ways to compare, like if you look at all the resources used by a golf course, so water, fertilizer, pesticides, and energy, is there a way that we can use that information to kind of develop a sustainability index and compare a golf course like in Wisconsin to one in Riverside? Because obviously those climates are way different. So they're going to likely have to use different management, but we're still all after like what is optimum management. And so it's a big task, but he's done a lot of great work, and we'll hopefully be finishing up later this year with that project. So yeah, short answer there is data-based turf management is kind of the area that I like to operate in.
Cool. And then I have a question kind of for both of you, and I'll start with Doug, is when you're identifying or scoping out a problem and, I'm thinking about the industry and people who are using the information, how do you balance, or how do you see the breakdown of your work as impacting, professional turf like golf courses and that area versus lawn care, or even just homeowners who are managing probably a much bigger acreage of turf and impact wise? But how do you see your program kind of fitting those different parts of the industry, Doug?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we try to cover all aspects. So we have my longest running trial, which will be 15 years now, is and Glenn, you've worked on this one, the home demo trials, where we just plant different species of grass, we mow at different heights, and then fertilize at different rates, and we just look at what happens to the ecology. So we think that's useful for people looking to select like the most appropriate cultivar, or look at how different fertilization or mowing practices work. So that's kind of the base level. We try to have a bunch of experiments going every year that provide information to that, like homeowner, like roadside turf. We're doing work with the DOT. And then when we start to move up into the professional turf managers, that we work usually through associations, either national, regional, or state level, to address their specific problems and concerns. And then that's where the database stuff that I was talking about earlier kind of comes in, because those groups have more money and more interest in managing turf, right? It's not just we might fertilize once or twice a year. It's like, how do we provide the best playing surface possible? And then so we usually spend more money doing research on those projects because they're more intensive, and then the results get used, I think, at a higher level. But yeah, we always try to think, are we covering all the sectors? Sod, lawn care, golf, sports turf, home lawns and parks. It's hard to do it all, but we definitely try to reach as many people as possible with our program.
Since Matteo, how about you? Is it anything different in where you work in California?
It's very similar. I think kind of all turfgrass programs in the country, they're kind of like trying to fit every pair of shoes that we get. We're covering a lot more the golf industry with our program, because California, it's one of the largest golf industry in the entire country. Same with the number of golf courses and market wise. However, we work and we get funding from city, from water districts. For example, several years ago, there was a program in which you get money for every square foot of lawn that you take out. So some research was done to kind of like verify like what is the actual benefit of taking out grass and putting xeriscape or putting some other type of vegetation that so we serve, we try to serve every aspect of the turfgrass industry, and every aspect they have to do with like landscape. So some other studies that we've done with other irrigation systems, such as like subsurface drip, but that's probably a little bit more for a homeowner situation. And we are currently looking to bring back our traffic simulator and start doing some more research with sport field related. So looking at drought conditions and traffic, how can you recover turf, or how can you better manage turf when you don't have a lot of water available?
Makes sense, yeah. So thinking about the differences in climate and water sources, quantity and quality. I remember it might have been 15 years ago at a conference in Wisconsin where we had a researcher from the Southwest, and I remember the comment that in the Southwest, those issues they're here, they're present now. We have to worry about how much water we have available, and in the Midwest, we don't think about that as much, but that time is coming. And I'm just curious, like, Doug, you worked in the Midwest, Matteo in the Southwest. How has that changed in the past 15 years, and what might the next 15 or maybe 50 years look like in terms of water challenges in areas that might not be challenged right now, but are kind of on the fringes of that? Matteo, I'll ask you.
Well, it definitely got worse and worse in the last 15 years. I mean, California, it's in the news basically every other day with either golf courses that don't have water for the irrigations, or water district that asked homeowner, not to water their front lawn and just let it die. So this one definitely were not happening 15 years ago. Same when I was in New Mexico for a long period of time. I remember that when I started, there were just few golf courses that were using treated effluent for the irrigation, and I think now that over 50% of the golf courses there, they have to use that recycled water. So it definitely, there is a major switch and a major changes, which has challenges with that. And sometimes the greenskeeper or the golf superintendent, they don't have the basic knowledge for that, and that's why we need to help with management practices and how to continue to do their jobs with this challenging time.
Absolutely. Doug, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, in the Midwest, it's still different. We don't have the focus on water availability quite yet. I mean, there's definitely an awareness of it, but I would say most of our research efforts have been focused on the fact that if you overwater, you have poor surfaces, right? So it's like we're trying to couple the idea that water conservation and desired playing surface are linked. In the homeowner market, it's different. And certainly what we see is, thankfully, most people don't have irrigation systems where I work and live. And the folks that do tend to overwater, and then we see all kinds of disease problems, shallow rooting associated with that. So we try to get the word out in the same manners. Like if you want a higher quality lawn, you got to learn how to irrigate better. I think that message is hard to get out to the big group of people. And the thing that will start to change that is when we do get watering restrictions and more of a Southwestern US attitude or regulations or something. So yeah, it's there. It's just not at the front of most people's minds in terms of just pure water conservation, but something, it's probably one of the top focuses of my research program.
That makes sense. Okay. So you mentioned how you work with Doug. I'll just direct this one to you and then go to Matteo after. So the way that you work with industry and with associations and groups to identify challenges and work on projects together. And Exacto is part of industry on the product side. How do you see that collaboration with industry in general, associations or companies, and like what should we be working on is maybe my question, to address these challenges, because they're not single questions, they're complicated systems. How could we be working together in general between university and industry?
Yeah, it's a complicated dance. That's a really good question. And like the industry perspective is we want to make sure our products work and that we're developing new things that will work even better, and that we're keeping up or beating the competition, right? And then the associations usually want to solve their immediate problems. Like, we heard all about the fall armyworm this year, and like, what are you doing to address that? Totally legit. And then the scientists like to think, like we just talked about, like what is turf going to look like in 50 years? So like balancing all those things is interesting. And I it's fun to work with all the groups. And when we're doing long-term projects, we have to be careful to explain why we think this is important, even though you might not be able to use it tomorrow. This is important for the future. From the industry standpoint, what can they do? I think I always like working with industry partners that are interested in the research side of it rather than the like just straight marketing, like our product is better equal to. That's just a little too boring. I think there's so many good questions. Like we'll take wetting agents. Like there's a million ideas and unknown things, and a lot of times we won't have, or the associations won't provide the funding to do it. But if we can find industry partners that also think those things are interesting and can see a benefit for their company, I think those are really fun partnerships to work on. Um, how do different chemicals last? How mobile are they? Because it's, the boring wetting agent studies, just spray it down and 30-day intervals and look at turf quality. And then the more interesting stuff is like, well, let's do some chemical analysis and more advanced. It costs more money, of course. And sometimes the results don't turn out like you want, which is the drawback of that from an industry side. But that's definitely the projects I enjoy collaborating with the most with industry partners.
The most interesting stuff is usually not the easiest at the beginning, right?
So. Yeah, all the easy answers are done, right? It's the harder questions that takes more time and more money to get at.
Yep, exactly. Matteo, how about you?
Yeah, it's very it's very challenging. Definitely, it relates a lot with what Doug Soldat has said. I think the industry has always been great in looking at the future and see the changes. So, for example, last year I worked with a couple of partners that are looking at the European market, for example, and trying to develop more like organic and more natural solutions for these problems. There are definitely like changes in the air. So, with either not so much on the golf, but there are some courses I've heard that in which the members have asked, the course to, for example, switch on 100% organic, and it could be that in 15 years we might don't have access to all the chemicals that we used to have. So these could be like the next focus for the future.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Things are definitely changing, that's for sure.
Yep.
Yep.
And then what I noticed also in the surfactant industry is that there is a trying or a willingness to perhaps move into the landscape market, and so make it a different system for applying the product. And so instead of like being a spray applications, put it into a granular compound, and then when we look at the entire systems, like for example, like in the breeding, it's so nice to talk about, like, okay, like it would be nicer to have a Bermuda grass that it's more drought tolerant and hold the green color like year round, but these takes times to develop, takes years of testing, and so you might start working now, but you're gonna have something ready in 10 years, and in 10 years from now the things that you develop was good for 10 years before. So you always, like in the breeding in particular, you always like trying to catch up with like a new disease or a new cold tolerance. So it's very challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glenn, I'm interested in your take on the university industry partnership.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the industry side of it, we're very grateful for the work that you guys do at universities, because personally, I think it's so important to have unbiased research that's going into not just testing a product, but testing, take irrigation, for example. A product might be one part of that, but the soil properties are important, the turf properties, the end user behaviors. And so I think you guys have that comprehensive, like, global view of people's problems. And that's something that in industry, I would like to push. I think we push our company, and I'd like to see others work with you guys as a systems-based research, where you're asking those bigger questions, like how can we change the way that we water, instead of, can I spray this and will it make the grass look greener? So I think that's the deeper level that we want to get to, and that's really what I think it's going to take to actually make an impact on water like water use efficiency on a big scale. It's not going to be one product that's sprayed and change that. It's going to be changing how we water. And so, yeah, we're grateful for the work that you guys do. And I think, there's lots of opportunities. Like we've funded grad students in the past, and just collaborate a lot with the work that you guys are doing. That needs to continue, I believe, in the future. Yep. Something I'm thinking about as we're talking is I'm thinking about the end users and the people who are managing turf. On the one hand, I think the number of golf courses has not increased, and maybe decreased or stayed about the same for a while now. It was increasing a lot in the 90s, and then it's kind of been stagnant. But then urbanization is a thing that's going to continue to increase. Like in the Midwest, that corridor from Chicago to Madison to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, like one day it could be, one big long urban corridor. So what does that mean? It means that the amount of turf is going to continue to be ever more important. Matteo, I'm not sure how urbanization will play out in your region. I don't know the area as well, but so I'll just turn the question kind of with that context. 50 years from now, with those forces at play, like how do you see the role of a turf extension specialist or professional researcher studying turf? How do you think that'll be affected by those trends of maybe stagnant in the professional turf, but then turf's more important than ever, right? With urbanization.
Yeah.
So, Matteo, ask you first.
So here the housing it's definitely booming. So even if there's not a lot of land, there's still like constructions happening. And what I noticed is that the area of the lawn is getting smaller. And so with that, the challenging sometimes of finding a better irrigation system to water smaller areas. And then when it's smaller, it gets a lot more attention because you don't have, the half-acre lawn that you need to worry about. Now you have, 200 square feet, just enough. And so you want it to be perfect. So with that, the input, despite being decreased because you have less area, there's a lot more expectation for that little piece of lawn to be perfect. And then the other things that I noticed is that on new development, they're trying to do, they're doing these small lawn areas, and then they make available for like every 200-300 house a big park. And that's where the city comes in, and that's usually who manage those parks. And so as extension specialist, the training and make it easier for those people to manage a larger area that then get utilized by multiple people. That's another big challenge. What we see is on those type of situation, the manager who is in charge keeps changing, sometimes 2 or 3 times during the year, because they either move up position or they find a new job that pays better. So it's always very difficult to have a stability on managing those larger areas. So those are like some of the challenges that I see on these like expanding population and grow in the housing.
Absolutely. Doug, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, maybe it's always fun to predict the future, like what's 50 or 100 years of turf management. Look, I think robots are starting to come, and you see those, that's going to come soon. It's going to change the way we mow. It's going to change the energy that we use. I just read about a park in Sweden that installed a really unique root zone. Basically, it's some capillary concrete base with sand on top of that. And then they pump water from 2 tanks on either side of the park, water through that sand root zone. And it's like a hydroponic system. And they found that it reduced the water use compared to the irrigation because you don't have to deal with drainage. So if you over irrigate, you get drainage past the root zone, that water's gone. I can't remember the number, but like 75% less water use. And then it's a sand, so it's like resistant to compaction at a public park. They said it looked really nice. So I start thinking about like, what do we do now inefficiently is like, we apply water, we apply nutrients, and then we have runoff and we have like pollution and wastewater that we're generating. So I think the ideal system is like, we got this little robot mowing our grass on solar power. And then we got some type of localized waste treatment system where it's the grass is cleaning the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium out of our waste streams. And then we don't even have irrigation because we're just using that to clean. Now, there's a ton of problems that need to be solved first, and there's money, and there's politics and policy and regulations and all that. But I think that's where I'd like to see things going, is think about turf as can be part of the solution to some of our ecosystem service issues in areas, rather than right now the general public looks at it as like, turf is bad and we need to get rid of turf. Where even in the Southwest, a system like I described there might work, because we need green spaces. You can look, everybody has positive interactions with green spaces and urban environments. They're super important. We just have to think differently about how we design them, I think.
Absolutely. Yep. And then I'm thinking now about the people who will make that happen and the people who will manage those systems. All three of us went through school and studied turfgrass, and I'm just curious now. I think a lot of the numbers in those programs has declined over the years, but there's still going to be people managing turf. And so, like, what are ways that you can teach and share your research with people and out there, even though those numbers are declining? Like, what are some other avenues towards teaching and disseminating that information if it's not going to be through a traditional 4-year degree? Matteo, what about you guys in Riverside?
Well, we don't have a turfgrass program here. So the one then it's available, it's in Pomona. And yes, numbers have been declining there. Used to be one in San Luis Obispo, and then also that one is not existent anymore. So definitely we had to find other ways to train, and these can be done with the traditional Master Gardener program or extension publications. But I think in the digital area, we were working here in the Southwest to kind of develop an online turf school. So for like these professional people, so kind of give them, like 6 months to a year to get a degree, and then have a bunch of specialists that comes in and talk and train these people on current issues. So these was like some ideas that we were bouncing around to develop like a new system to deliver information.
Cool. Doug, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Matteo has just said. I think, in terms of disseminating information, I've gotten a little different ideas about that now than I had when I started. I think, the traditional presentation and extension publications are probably not as effective as we think they are. And so like decision support tools basically create software that the users interact with that have the research results incorporated into the background, Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like all good management site specific. So something about the weather and the site, and then have that information interact with the research results to give people like cultivar recommendations or timing recommendations for pest control. And I think that kind of just-in-time information is that's what we need to do. And there's definitely a lot of platforms out there that are starting to do that now. But I think that's the way to get new research out, is to do it by software. And then the education component's really important too. Like you said, yeah, programs are declining. Our 4-year program's way down from its peak. But like Matteo mentioned, we're looking at alternative ways to train people online, and even just having them come into short courses. Maybe we have 5 students right now who are full-time employees at golf courses, but they come to us November through March and take courses with us during the off season here in the Midwest. And then, things like that, ways to train people in a little bit out of the box way that I think a lot of universities are experimenting with right now.
That's exciting. What about in-person events have been complicated, but Doug, earlier you mentioned that there's a field day coming up this summer. You guys have one on the calendar?
Yeah, we're August 2nd, 2022 will be our in-person field day at the OJ North Center. It's always a good time. So if you're watching this in the area, mark that down. We'd love to have you come out and see what we're working on, see our different trials, and grab a lunch.
Cool. And Matteo, you guys have a field day too, right?
Yep, we actually had it last year in person, and people were happy to be back and meet. So we did try to practice social distancing and wearing a mask, and the plan is to have one again this year, September 15.
Got it. Cool. Okay. Yep. Highly recommend checking out those field days for anybody listening. So great. Well, are there any closing comments or thoughts or questions that either of you want to share before we jump off?
No, I don't think so, Glenn. This is fun. It's good to see you. Good to catch up, and look forward to working with you this summer.
Yeah, same, Doug. Thanks.
Yeah, same here. We last year was the first year for my first year at University of California-Riverside, and it was fun. A lot of challenging. Same, we have problems finding students and people that wants to work and help, but hopefully this year we can bring some more on board.
Absolutely. Well, hope it's a good year for everybody. A good year of moving forward and making progress.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys.